Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, welcome everyone. We're joined today by Ajahn Nando visiting us from Thailand and Winnipeg, a bit of both. Welcome, Ajahn. And Ajahn Nando and I have known each other for pretty much the whole of my monastic life. I think you met me as a layman back in the day. So, as a brief biography, Ajahn Nando was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. At the age of 21, he traveled to Thailand to stay at Wat Pah Nanachat. He took full Bhikkhu ordination at the age of 22. During his monastic life, he has had the opportunity to live with several renowned forest monks, including Ajahn Anan, Luang Piak, and Bun-Deet. So, Ajahn, we're so glad you joined us. Thank you for visiting. And we get a chance to basically today ask questions of you and have the community meet you, basically.
Okay.
So, a good starting point, I thought, would you tell us a bit about your path to ordination and what made you take robes?
Okay. Well, my path to ordination is probably a little odd compared to most people's. So I had originally gotten interested in Buddhism when I was about 15. My mom's one of these people who has a lot of books. And so I just started reading books of hers about religion. And when I started reading about Buddhism, it right away clicked. And then I had wanted to go stay at Wat Pah Nanachat in Thailand. But on the website, it said, and this is, back 2005, and on the website, it said you needed meditation experience beforehand. And coming from Winnipeg at that time, we didn't have much in the way of Theravada Buddhism. So I started traveling to Birken Forest Monastery with Ajahn Sona and doing meditation retreats there and just staying for periods of time there. So for maybe about 6-7 months, I was going back and forth between there and where I come from. And they're quite far. I think it's probably about 2,000 kilometers apart. And then I got a job, started saving up money to go to Wat Pah Nanachat in Thailand. But when I went, I didn't have the intention of ordaining. I was planning on just staying for 2 months. I had my return ticket and everything. And when I got there, I got very inspired by the monastery, by the monks practicing there. Very early on when I was there, as a layman, I had the opportunity to meet Luang Liam, and so that was very inspiring. So then I decided to ordain, threw away my return ticket, had to make the call to my parents to tell them I wasn't coming home. I was only 21 at the time. So
how'd that go?
It went better than you'd think. When I left to go to Thailand, again, I was only planning on 2 months, return ticket, everything already. My mom was crying. She said, she's like, I know you're not coming back. I know you're going to ordain as a monk. And she was right. I was wrong, And so, and then ended up ordaining it in Thailand. And I've spent most of my monastic life. So I entered Wat Pah Nanachat in 2006. And since then, I've spent a total of about 2 years in Australia, and the rest of the time has all been in Thailand. So, yeah.
What made you want to stay? Like, what was inspiring to you about the place?
I think for me, it was just seeing, my only experience with monks was going to Birken Monastery with Ajahn Sona. So, they had 2 monks there, very quiet, secluded place. And then going to Thailand, and it's like, you've got a monastery full of monks. They're all practicing together. Just the way they're living together, practicing, talking about Dharma, I found very inspiring and decided to stay. Yeah.
And I think I don't know if you wanted to tell us about your first Dharma talk, because I found that quite good.
So my first Dharma talk didn't go so well. So when I was a layman, I was unbelievably shy. I was very shy and terrified of public speaking. Like, I would do anything possible to avoid public speaking. Even in high school, like, my English teacher made an exception for me not to have to give the speeches because I was just so shy. And so after my first Pansa, my novice Pansa or my novice Wasa, the rains retreat at Wat Pah Nanachat in the Wat Pah Sangha, there's this tradition where you have to, every single person who spent the Pansa at the monastery has to give a Dhamma talk at the last day of Pansa. It's it's an all-night affair, and for most of the monks, it's a really fun time. We usually draw names to see who goes next, and everyone really enjoys it. You talk about your experience. The lay people really enjoy it. For me, it was always terrifying. It was one of the worst nights of the year. And so, part of the tradition is you don't prepare before you give a Dhamma talk. So, it got to my turn. I'm this novice, don't speak any Thai. I get up on the tamat, which is like the Dhamma speaking chair, and I do my Namo Tassas 3 times, my Buddhang, Dhammang, Sanghang, Namasami, and then I freeze. I just sit there. I don't say a single word. And it was just this long, awkward pause. And then finally, the older village ladies, felt really bad and started asking me questions. They'd be like, Ajahn Nando, where do you come from? Canada. And then freeze again. Ajahn Nando, where are your parents? Canada. So it was, it didn't go too well. Luckily, the novice who was translating for me was a friend of mine. He was Thai, but had lived a lot of his life in the West. So I could give, a 1-word, 2-word answer, and he'd translate for about 5 minutes. So it was, so I was lucky he helped me out with that. But the advantage is you give your first talk like that, every other talk afterwards is just going to be better. So
it only can go up.
Yeah. You set the bar really low.
So you gave a talk last Saturday, and it was very good. And I think one of the things that people appreciated was it had a Thai flavor to it.
Yeah.
A sort of systematic. It was very practical. Here's how you actually work with, sense restraint, with devotion to wakefulness, with restraint in eating. What do you feel you gained from ordaining in Thailand as opposed to ordaining in the West?
Well, having never ordained in the West or lived in monasteries in the West, really, except Australia, I can't speak too much to what the experience is there. But I think for me, what I feel I gained ordaining in Thailand was really getting to see a Buddhist country and being part of a big Buddhist scene. There's monasteries everywhere. There's everywhere you go, there's monks. There's special things in Thailand set up for monks. In the airports, there's a special area for monks to go. So I think being part of that, and there's also a cultural expectations on your behavior. Like, as a monk in Thailand, the whole country knows how you're supposed to behave. So if you do, like, say in Thailand, there's a cultural thing that monks don't eat or drink standing up. So if you were to do that, people would right away see that and know you did something you're not supposed to do. But I think for me also one of the important things was that being away from home. I was and I still am very close to my family. And, at the time I had a very close group of friends. So for me, actually being away from them helped. It was very difficult in the beginning. The first several months I was very, very homesick. I was very lonely, missed my family, missed my friends. There was in my first maybe 6 months when I was what we call a pakao, like a white-robed layman, I was constantly thinking of going home. But there was this voice in my head which just kept saying, if you leave, you'll never come back. It was always like, if you leave, you'll never come back. You think, oh, I could just, wait a few years and come back. Or, I was thinking, because I didn't speak any Thai, I'm not good with languages. I was thinking, maybe I could go up to Chiang Mai and do one of these like 3-month intensive Thai courses and then come back. But again, this voice just kept saying, don't go. If you leave, you won't come back. And so I think for me, being away from everything I knew was really beneficial, because I think for me, the draw would have been there. It would have been easier, for friends to visit, family to visit, and very easily pull me back into the lay life. And so I think if I had ordained in the West, I probably wouldn't still be a monk. So I'm very, very grateful that I did ordain in Thailand.
What have you, that's a pretty sincere decision, and to stay there and not come back. I mean, I think in 16 years, you've been back twice or something.
Yeah, in 17 years, twice.
17 years. So,
but But to be fair, my family do come to visit
Mm.
every year, so that makes it a lot easier. My family is incredibly supportive.
I think your dad ordained temporarily last spring
My dad
or winter.
in end of December 30th, he ordained and did a month as a temporary monk. He was the first monk in the Western Lumpur Cha Sangha to ordain the first father of a monk, sorry, and hopefully not the last.
Well done.
So yeah, I have a very supportive family, and so they'd come and visit every year. And of course, being Buddhist from Winnipeg, there's not so much for them to see there. Whereas they come to Thailand, it's wintertime in Winnipeg, minus 40 Celsius, and and so they get to escape winter for a bit, come visit me, take them around to see the different ajahns, different respected meditation teachers. So it worked out best for everybody,
And one thing you've lived for 4 years with Luang Por Piak, with these really amazing teachers, and that's something you really get in Thailand. I mean, we have impressive teachers here, but there's a certain type of what we call a Kruba Ajahn who lives in Thailand. And what do you have, like 2 or 3 experiences with them that touched you that kind of come to mind as kind of really indicative moments of the power of living with people like that, like some of the most powerful teaching moments you've had from living with these masters? I think at Luang Por Piak you were sitting for 4 hours a night without moving and chanting as well.
By the end, it was about, it could be, depending on the night, 4 hours. I think it would be really difficult just to nail down one of them, or just a couple of these. I think one of the things is also you have this teacher that you really feel knows what they're talking about. You really feel that they have attained something in their practice, and so you have a lot of faith in them. So when they give you advice, you take it that much more seriously. So, for example, when I lived with Luang Por Piak, I was really excited. I'm going to go live with this great Kruba Ajahn. I'm going to just be sitting and walking meditation all the time, and it's going to be, really great, like kind of like in the suttas, or like in the biography of Lumpur Mun, except the monastery is kind of in the city. But and then we got there, and Lumpur Piak had all of us do these long chanting sessions. In the beginning, it was you chant. You chant all the paritas, like all the chants we do. You chant then the Itipiso 108 times. Sometimes you do the full Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and these like 3-4 hour chanting sessions at night, and then you're expected to stay up the rest of the night. We do it. It was getting about 3 courses a week and a month, sorry, and a course would be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. So that's 9. And then plus all the one pras, that's another 4. So 13 nights a month. But I didn't want to do that. It was like I didn't come to chant for 3 hours. Like I was expecting to meditate. But I have all this faith in Luang Por Piak, and he tells us to do it, so you do it. And I was really grateful for it, because over the long term, I found it really beneficial for my practice. So there's a lot of times when you're living with a teacher like this that they see something in your practice and they may tell you, actually, you need to change this. And you're thinking like, but it's working for me. I think it's working. But because of your faith in them, you do what they say. And then you actually see, oh, okay, yeah, he knew what he was talking about. Yeah. It goes much better like this. So it's, having a teacher like that was really beneficial.
What did you find the chanting did for you over time?
Well, one is, it really helps with samadhi. Like it helps, it's a tool to help develop samadhi. Like you see a lot of times in Mahayana, they'll do a lot of these repetitive chants, and that's a way to help develop your samadhi. The other is, it helps build barami, and Luang Por Piak would really talk about that. Like, we're building our virya barami, our kanti barami, our sacha barami, our adhitthana barami, because you're expected to sit. Like you weren't supposed to be getting up and going to the washroom. You were expected to sit there and not even move your legs. I mean, you could if you had to, but you were expected to sit. And then at one point we had been doing the chanting for maybe a year and a half, and Luang Por Piak said, okay, so now we're all used to sitting for 3 or 4 hours. So now we're going to just sit meditation instead. He's like, all of our bodies are ready to it. The chanting helped our bodies get ready to sit. So now we're just going to sit without the chanting. And it was like, okay, yeah, and now you can do those long sits. So again, it was a real skillful means. and it just had this energy to it, this power to it. It was like this project we were all doing, and so it really you get really into doing it, and it helped because we had to stay up for the night. So 3-4 hours of your night you've been taken up doing this energetic chanting, and then afterwards you've got this energy going. So it is easier to stay up all night, and it hits the point it's kind of a little too late to go to bed anyways. So it's like if I go to bed I might not wake up. So yeah.
And that was 13 nights a month usually.
About that, depending when the Wampras were.
And Luang Por Piak, and you stayed with Luang Por Piak, Luang Por Bun-Deet, and Luang Por Anan together. What were the other two? How would you describe the other two Ajahns in that list?
Again, they each have their own unique style. Like when I stayed with Ajahn Anan, I was very junior. I was, I think 2 pansas when I first went there, and spent about a year and a half there. Oh, excuse me. And for me, it was again very beneficial. I learned so much from living there. Like Ajahn Anan was always teaching Dharma. There was always, again, my Thai wasn't very good there, so there was always monks to translate. Ajahn Anan was very accessible. If you had a question, there was always a time in the day you could go and find him to ask the question, and he would answer it. He'd explain it well. Someone to translate. And an important thing is I made a lot of friends there. Like there was a lot of monks, Thai monks, and a lot of Western monks around the same pansa as me.
That is where we met. So
no, we met at Nanachat.
Oh yeah, a few days before. I keep forgetting.
But so and a lot of those friends I'm still very, very close friends with to this day. And it is important for us to have these kalyana mitta, like these spiritual friendships. And then when I stayed with Luang Por Bun-Deet, I've known Luang Por Bun-Deet for, I don't know, maybe about 11 years. Whenever he'd come visit us at Wat Pah Nanachat, I would upatak him and take care of him. And so then after I started going out on Tudong, I went to stay with his monastery, and it happened to be when COVID hit. So I was out on Tudong, and you're hearing kind of whispers here and there about COVID or some flu, and the airlines are shutting down, but you're not connected to anything, right? And so when I got there, shortly after I arrived at his monastery in Tudong, got locked down there, and had a great time, and he's, his character is just so much metta, and and again, really respect his practice,
With Tudong, you spoke about kind of wandering on Tudong, and I know you've spent quite a few months in Dowdam, which is the branch of Wat Pah Nanachat that's in Kanchanaburi, which is way out in the sort of western jungle of Thailand. There's tigers, a whole bunch of stuff. So what would you say were 2 lessons you or other monks have learned from kind of the classic traditional wandering on Tudong or living in the jungles and forests of Thailand?
Well, the forests are always teaching us, but maybe to Tudong first. One of the things I really, learned about Tudong, because you're really out by yourself. Like even though, as monks, we spend most of our days by ourselves and most of our time alone, we're still in a monastery together, and there's still, the support of the monastery. Whereas, you're out on Tudong and you're alone. Like, if anything happens, you're alone, so you really learn to like depend on yourself, be really frugal in what you do. And at least for me, there was this really strong, like anicca sanya, like this perception of impermanence, because, you're walking every day and you're passing things. You meet people and they're gone, and you're never going to see them again. Probably, you're passing things. So you're just constantly, whatever's coming is going right away. So there was this constant perception for me of impermanence. But again, I think a lot, like we learn so much about the forest because as monks, especially living in the forest monasteries, we're so close to the forest. We are, it's very little which separates us from the animals, from the insects. We have no control over the temperature. And so this is one of the things, you don't have control over the forest. So instead of, a lot of times in our life, to minimize our suffering, or to really, to minimize our suffering, we manipulate the environment around us. So it's hot, we turn on the air conditioner. It's cold, turn on the heater. A lot of times, like your house, at least in Canada, it's pretty solid 22 degrees the whole summer and winter.
What does that mean, Ajahn?
I don't
Fahrenheit.
know Fahrenheit. I don't know Fahrenheit. But yeah, it's a pretty, and there's insects, in your house. They're outside. They don't come in. Animals. Whereas you're in the forest. It's hot. You're hot. Everyone's hot. And living with Luang Por Biak, I mean, it's in the 40s. It's incredibly hot.
That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for people in the U.S.
It's cold. You don't have that much protection from the cold. Everything's cold. The insects, they're there. The kuti keeps them out to an extent, but you still have to deal with them. So you're constantly like having to adjust yourself to not suffer over these situations, and whereas, so you find that very beneficial over time. Yeah. Well, it's my interpretation of it,
It's a good one. I mean, and when you were in Dowdom, did you know monks that encountered any kind of more intense animals in the mix, in terms of facing down fear,
Oh, we all do. It's just like, because Dowdom is deep in the jungle. And I think the closest village, if I remember right, is like 45 kilometers away. So it's been a long time since I've been there, but it's just, there's elephants, there's tigers, they come into the monastery. There's wild boars, you see them all the time. There's bears. And so I haven't been there in many years, but I remember when I was there as a novice, I was staying way out at the back, way past anyone else. I think it was maybe about 20-minute walk to where I was staying. And so it's kind of in the thick forest. It's all hilly. There's all these streams going through. And so, of course, sound's not going to travel. I was joking. I was like, anything happened to me out there, no one would hear me scream. And then one day we were having the afternoon tea, and I was going late to it. And I'm walking down the path. So I know all the other monks are at the sala, which is just a tin roof with a couple pillars, And I'm walking down the path, and I hear a noise, and I look up, and there's a bear running towards me. And it gets to maybe 2 meters at most from me and sees me, and then bolts into the undergrowth across the stream. And then right afterwards, the second one comes and does the same thing. I always figured they were maybe playing or fighting or mating or something and didn't see me. But yeah, and stuff like that's quite normal. Monks have encounters with tigers. One year, the elephants came through and destroyed the sala and destroyed there was a water tank, which was big enough you'd have to get inside of it to clean it. They flattened it to a pancake. So, yeah. So you get used to it,
And you've lived, this is your 16th Vasa or something like that, right? Or 15th as a monk?
Sorry?
Is this your 15th or 16th Vasa?
Going into my 16th.
16th. So what have you seen in terms of, what would you describe as the most important factor in monks, staying in robes? What keeps a monastic from disrobing?
Well, different monks will give you different answers on this. But for me, I think the most important thing is probably Satya Bharami.
What's Satya?
And
what's Bharami?
Satya Bharami, these are these personality traits or these spiritual qualities we all have. And Satya is translated usually as truthfulness, but it's more of honesty. So it's not to do with your speech, like not lying. That would be under Sila Bharami. So Satya Bharami is really being honest, and especially being honest with yourself, being honest where you are in your practice, being honest what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Because a lot of us, we create this image of ourselves in our head, and we try to live up to certain standards or certain ideals. And it's maybe not necessarily the reality of the situation. So you can see it, say, in regards to your meditation practice. You may want to practice in a certain way because this is how the Kru Ajahns practiced, or this is how you read it in Luang Por Man's biography or in Lungta Mahabua's books. But you're not them, and you're not at their level yet. So when even though ideally it sounds really nice, it's not, you're not being honest with yourself of where you're actually at. You have to actually stop, be honest, and being like, okay, well, this is where I'm at.
Hmm.
This is the type of practices I have to do for myself.
Hmm.
Like, and then, so sometimes you do see monks trying to practice above where they're at. And like I knew this one monk, and he was always trying to convince himself he was this, great Kruba Ajahn. He was a very junior monk, and he went and spent the pansa in a cave, didn't speak to anybody, wasn't reading, just this really austere determinations for his pansa. And then at the end of the pansa, he wanted to disrobe, and he did disrobe. So it was, he wasn't ready to practice like that. Or sometimes, say going into these situations of solitude and stuff. And because again, we've romanticized it. It sounds really great. And if it goes well, it goes really well. Like Luang Cha said, living in solitude. If it goes well, it's the absolute best. If it goes poorly, it's the absolute worst. And so you'll see monks really trying to live up to that ideal, and it's the absolute worst. But they stick at it because again, they're not being honest of where they are with it. So
humility is the important factor then, to some extent, like acknowledging where you're at and kind of the level of your practice.
And looking what works, what doesn't work. So that's my opinion on it. Different monks will have different things they see as important to stay.
That's a good one, Ajahn. And we have some questions here in the chat. If people want to ask questions of Ajahn Nando, just type them in and we can ask. So Larry asks, did you harvest from the forest, for example, medicinal leaves or root dyes?
As monks, we're not allowed to cut or damage any plants, but lay people will do it from the forest. And so a lot of the stuff we do use are things which have come from the forest. So for example, our robes we make at Wat Pah Nanachat, we still do the traditional way of dyeing and washing our robes in what's called Gankanoon, which is a dye made from boiling the heartwood of the jackfruit tree. So we still do that. And, a lot of Thai medicines are made from herbs, but we don't do any of it ourselves. We make the dye ourselves, but we don't cut the trees and stuff.
I heard of a practice where monastics entering a jungle announce themselves as a follower of the Buddha as a protection. Is that an actual practice?
A lot of monks will do that. They'll maybe have a little personal variations on that, but it is quite common.
What are they protecting themselves from, Ajahn?
If there's malevolent spirits, or for animals and stuff, we also have chants to do for protection against animals. So.
Yeah, most monks will know one at least that the Buddha gave to sort of spread loving kindness towards snakes and other animals. So that's a really common one. Charles asks, if you were on Tudong and at a great distance from a village, how do you see food? It's a good question.
You walk to the next village. Sometimes you are in areas where there aren't villages, and sometimes there are just like single farmhouses. But sometimes you just have to walk to the next village. And so, I think the longest bindabat I ever went on Tudong was about 15 kilometers. So I started about 3-4 in the morning walking to get to the next village. So it's pretty normal.
Have you heard of monks having to go for numerous days to get to the next place or anything like that before?
I don't know any personally. Most places in Thailand, you'll outside of the national parks and forests, there are people, and you, at least for me, I planned my routes. So I was going through. I've only done mine in Northeast Thailand, which is quite a populated area. A lot of farms and villages and stuff. So
that's Ubon, where Luang Por Chan's monastery was, and Ajahn.
But I went all the ways up through a bunch of the provinces through.
All the way to
Northeast
north.
Thailand, yeah.
Ajahn, what in the practice has helped you most to overcome shyness?
For shyness in regards to people, there was no specific practice. Part of it was just living in the monastery. So, I ordained at Wat Pah Nanachat, which is a training monastery. So there's always people coming and going, and you have to interact with people. And so you get more experience over time. And also the system at Wat Pah Nanachat when you're a new monk, you move around. You might spend a few months here, might come back to the main monastery, might go and spend a year at another monastery. So you really get to see the bigger scene, like the bigger monastic scene. But you're being sent to a monastery where you don't know anyone and you don't even speak the language. So that situation just forced me to overcome the shyness. But in regards to giving Dhamma talks, admittedly, my heart still races a bit before I start. But the big thing was actually just going and doing it. When I was 10 pansas, I was in Australia, and Ajahn Anan came to visit, and we were having nampana with him, like our tea time with him. And this one Australian monk says to him, goes, "Oh, Ajahn, Nando's 10 pansas, and he's never given a Dhamma talk." And so Ajahn Nando told me I have to start giving Dhamma talks. So it was just giving them and having to give them. And the first number of them were pretty rough. I was, speaking really quickly. I normally speak quick, but these were really quick, staring at the floor the whole time, almost having a panic attack beforehand. But over time, the more you give them, the more used to it you get, and it kind of gets better and better. So that's how I did it. There's no specific practice. Yeah.
Give Dhamma talks and go to a bunch of monasteries.
Yeah.
Ajahns, how did you know monastic life would be right for you? And what are the signs that someone's likely to disrobe?
Well, I didn't know that monastic life would be right for me. I didn't know getting into it. I wanted to try it. I was hoping it would. My parents knew it would be right for me. After I'd been a monk for a few years, my parents said to me, they're like, "Yeah, we never thought you'd work a 9-to-5 job."
Hasn't your mom forbidden you from disrobing?
Yeah, my parents, because they're both Buddhist, have forbidden me from ever disrobing. I have an older brother, so their expectations for grandchildren are on him. So I'm hopefully off the hook. But yeah, so I, again, having that supportive family, but yeah, I wasn't sure. It's just one of those things you've got to try out, and yeah, it might work, might not.
Ajahn, I'm curious about well, actually, the second part of the question is, what are the signs that someone is about to might disrobe?
Sometimes there are signs, and sometimes there aren't. It kind of depends on the person. Some people are very good at keeping their cards close, and some people aren't. So a lot of times you can see if someone's struggling. You can see they're not getting happiness in the holy life. A lot of times for us to live the holy life and to stay as a monk long term, you have to get, it's called samana sukha. Like, you have to get happiness from being a monk. Mm-hmm. So you've got to find something in your monastic life where you get your happiness from. And so, some monks, it's meditation. Some monks, it's, study. Some monks, it's teaching. Some monks, it's combinations. But you have to find some kind of combination, or find something in the life where you're getting that happiness, where you're going to stay. Because if you hate it, like you hate the monastic life, and you're not going to stay. There was this one senior monk, Thai Ajahn, gave this Dhamma talk. If you want to stay a monk for your entire life, you've got to love your alms bowl. You've got to, and so he went on to other things, but he was saying basically you have to learn how to like the monastic life and how to get enjoyment out of being a monk. So if, say, for example, you hate eating out of the bowl, I wish I could eat in a plate. Again, that can be something which maybe isn't in and of itself the cause for you to disrobe, but is a contributing factor to you disrobing. So what you've got to do is you've got to go against that. You've got to use your contemplation. Think, about the benefits of eating in the bowl, and change your attitude. Because just because we, our thoughts are coming up a certain way towards a certain situation or towards a certain person, it doesn't mean that it always has to be like that. Like, I have to dislike this person, or I'm always going to dislike eating in my bowl. It can change. But again, we don't have to wait for it to change on its own. We can be active in changing it, and we can choose, okay, I want to learn how to enjoy doing this. I want to overcome my dislike for this person. I want to overcome the difficulties I'm having in this situation. And so we actively work on this and look at the causes of suffering and try to eliminate them and try to create causes for our own happiness and enjoyment.
Yeah. That kind of dovetails nicely into something we were talking about yesterday, which is you've spoken about working with anger. And like, I know that's something I work with plenty. And what are your thoughts on people working with anger and aversion and dislike?
I think it's good.
Nice.
I think it's good.
Ajahn Nando stamp of approval.
Yeah, again, we all have different personality types, different characters. So we've got all the kilesas in us, but we all have them in different combinations. So in very emphasized in the Thai forest tradition is, or at least in my experience in it is, personality types, knowing your personality type. But at the end of the day, we all have anger, so we've all got to find skillful means to work on our anger. I remember once when I was a layman, I read somewhere in a book, I think it was on Tibetan Buddhism, saying, one moment of anger can ruin a whole lifetime of merit. And you can think about it, even more worldly sense, right? So someone's working a job, and then they lose their temper really bad and hit their boss or something. Boom, they're gone. They've lost their job, maybe assault charges. And, just one moment of anger can completely change their life. So, we've got to learn how to work on this and develop skillful means to deal with our anger and overcome it, but many skillful means, because we can't just depend on one technique. So if we only have one way to fix it, one way to deal with our anger, it might not work in certain situations, or one day it might not work. So we've got to have a few tools ready to go. Yeah.
You have any tools for us that have worked for you?
A big one is practicing metta. Having mindfulness, really catching that anger when it starts coming up, and having because the quicker you catch the anger, the easier it is to work with. Like you see when you have an experience with someone, they say something to you which is offensive. In the beginning, it's small. It's kind of like, oh, but then you start thinking about it. You start proliferating about it. It spins around and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more angry you are about it, the more difficult it is to remove that emotion, right? So you want to catch it, be mindful and catch it early, get to know yourself when you're getting angry, and use your contemplation. Look at the situation. Is this permanent? Have I felt like this before? Of course we have. What happened? It ended up going away. So find skillful means to reflect. Like the Buddha recommended, if we have anger towards someone or a grudge against someone, he gave 5 means for it. He gave metta, like loving kindness, karuna, compassion, equanimity, upekkha. He also said, just avoid the person. If it's really that bad, just avoid them. Or also reflect on karma. You think, okay, they've made this karma from their actions. It's their karma. They're going to get the results of it. You can also reflect on, say, the drawbacks of this. If I act on this, what's going to happen? Like I was saying, like the example at work, you get into this incident at work, if I act on this, what's going to happen? And again, you just have to get several of these and work on them and develop them and have them ready to go. Because one of the things, which is always emphasized by the Kruba Ajahns is practice metta before you get angry. So because if you never really develop metta, you've never developed a way to deal with these problems. When the problem arises, you're not going to have the mindfulness or the knowledge of how to do it. So you do it beforehand, so you're prepared for it. It's like you see like firefighters, right? Firefighters are constantly training on how to put out fires, how to unroll their hoses, where to spray and stuff. So they're prepared that when it comes into that intense situation with a fire, they just run out and do it. They know exactly what to do. They're just running on like second nature. Because you don't want them to try to figure out how to use a hose when your house is burning down, right? So it's the same with us. When our anger is burning, we want to already know how to put it out. So,
Ajahn, in that list of 5, mudita, sympathetic joy, is conspicuously absent.
It's not there.
Because, I think it is one of the hardest to develop, especially towards people we're angry at. So that leads into Joseph's question, which is, Ajahn, could you share some examples of how you've cultivated mudita in your practice?
Oh, you're assuming I've done this already. For me, like Ajahn Nisabo was saying, I think for a lot of Westerners, mudita is a very difficult one. I think, loving kindness, compassion, seeing someone who's suffering, things aren't going well is quite easy for us. but to actually celebrate other people's successes, especially when it's something we wanted, I think that's very difficult. I think there's almost a culture of envy and jealousy. My experience. So one of the ones I've done is try to actually just put myself in their shoes. You see someone getting something which was good for them and think, oh, how would I feel if that happened? And bring up that emotion. Like, say, I don't know, for lay people, say someone got a promotion at work. Just think, how would I feel when I got a promotion at work? Or how did I feel last time I got one? And bring up that emotion and be like, oh, I hope he feels like that right now. This is probably how he feels. I really hope he feels like that right now. Or think of it as like, if something like that happened good to me, would I want someone to kind of have their hate on for me, for no reason? So that for me, that's how I've done it.
It's great. How do you know you're ready to practice in solitude?
Well, the Buddha, he gave these conditions. There was one time Ananda took some monks to go on Tudong and live in solitude, and they all disrobed. And then Venerable Mahakassapa admonished him and called him a youngster. And basically the sutta was saying you have to be devoted to the Apanaka Dhammas. So I gave out the talk on the other day about
what are those?
About sense restraint, moderation in eating, and devotion to wakefulness. So when you've got these balanced and you're secure in these, then you can try it. Because if you're not, say you're not devoted to wakefulness, and you're in solitude and you've got nothing to do all day, you're going to sleep. You're going to oversleep. You're going to get just tired from the oversleeping. You won't have mindfulness to practice. You'll overeat, which will make you oversleep some more. So, but also the best way to see if you're ready is just go try. Go try living in seclusion, or I guess for lay people, maybe doing a retreat, and be ready to, if it's, be ready to expect it not to be easy. Some people it's very easy. Some people it's more difficult. Don't give up right away. If you're having difficulties, it's not, some difficulties come up and you're like, oh, done, didn't work for me. Some of these difficulties you really do have to overcome, or do take time for your mind to calm down, get into that situation. But then you have to have the wisdom and the satyabarmi, the honesty, to actually, when it's not working, say, okay, this isn't working. I need to, I'm maybe not ready for this yet. And don't feel bad about it. Some people, solitude is their thing. Some people, it's not their thing so much, or they can only do it for periods. So don't get hard on yourself, and you can always try again later. Your practice gets stronger, try again later. And you might see that when you live in solitude, the first time might be a short period, and then it gets longer and longer and longer. So that's for us, at Wat Pah Nanachat, we'll be at the main monastery for a while. We'll go spend a few months in a quiet monastery, come back to the main monastery. And then it's like that. So you get more used to having this time alone.
Thank you, Ajahn. Namaste Khan Ajahn Nando. I had the opportunity to stay at Wat Pah Nanachat 7 years ago for a short time. I still feel so fortunate to have had that chance. Thank you for helping keeping the Dhamma alive there.
No problem.
Ajahn. No problem. Ajahn Nando has been in charge of, for much of the time, training the new monastics and postulants. So this is
just recently was the Bhikkhu novice that I was training.
We are grateful for this.
It was easy. They were such a good group. Tell them what to do and they did it. Tell them what not to do, they didn't do it. It was really easy.
That's not always the case.
Not always the case.
Shraddha. Ajahn, you mentioned knowing where one is before making determinations. How can we assess where we are and what practices or determinations we are ready for?
Okay, so when we make determinations, like these are like adhitanas, one of the things, because adhitana is one of the baramis, and we want to strengthen it. We want to, because like in life you see some people and they set their mind to something and they just won't stop until they do it. It's like, I'm going to run a marathon, and they'll train every day until they're ready to run a marathon. Or some people, I'm going to, whatever it is in life, they set their mind to it and they do it. They make the determination, the adhitana, and they stick to this. So this is just, they've developed this adhitana barami. So for us, how we develop this aditana barami is gradually. It's not, people may, it's not doing some big grand gesture the first time, but so we gradually build it up. So what you want to know is, say, for example, doing an aditan for how long to sit. If the longest you've ever sat before is 1 hour, don't make an aditan to sit for 6 hours, because when you break these aditans, what you're doing is you're weakening your aditana barami. So, you're like just that mental quality of when you actually formally like say your aditan, that this is now unbreakable, that because that's what we want. So if you're breaking them, there's no strength to that anymore, because it's like your word to yourself means nothing. But the more we keep it and the more important it becomes, and the more we don't want to break it, the stronger this becomes. So for example, Ajahn Isra teaches, every time you sit meditation, make the aditana, I will sit for, whatever length you normally do, half an hour. And sometimes you find once you've made this aditan, all of a sudden the kilesas are stirred up and you want to get up, you want to move. Luang Por Biak said, once you made the aditan, you can't get up unless it's diarrhea. It's the only exception. Maybe if their house was on fire, it would be an exception too. It's obviously something threatening your life, but diarrhea was the only other exception. And so again, you can push yourself a little, push yourself what you think you can do, but don't do something you've never done before.
Thank you, Ajahn. We have to move on to, we get to move on to Zoom now for those who are interested. Usually what we do is after this 45-minute live stream, we'll move on to a more intimate Zoom session. So I've just pasted the link into the chat. People can either click on it there or go to clearmountainmonastery.org, and halfway down the page, you'll see a link to the Wednesday evening live stream. Ajahn, this was such a pleasure. Thank you for visiting us.
Thank you for having me.
Come more.
We'll see. The future is uncertain.
And join us on Zoom if you want more chance to sort of talk to Ajahn Nando, and we'll have you give another talk on Saturday, I hope.
Okay, for sure.
Okay. See you all soon.